Williams O'Corey had everything most men could only dream of: money, power, and a name that made people stand up straighter when they heard it. At just 30 years old, Forbes Africa crowned him Nigeria's richest young entrepreneur. He was the brilliant mind behind Apex Structures, a civil engineering empire that had reshaped skylines across Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and Johannesburg. But beneath the tailored suits and private jet smiles, Williams was deeply lonely. He had dated models, actresses, and influencers, women whose beauty could silence a room, but every relationship ended the same way, with their eyes on his wallet, not his soul. They liked the lifestyle, not the man. Some nights, Williams would sit alone on the rooftop of his Maitama mansion in Abuja, staring into the city lights that twinkled like artificial stars. He had bought that mansion for 950 million naira, yet no laughter echoed in its massive hallways, no warmth lingered in its designer-furnished rooms. Then one night, as he flipped through an old photo album, he saw a faded picture of his late grandmother. In it, she stood barefoot beside his grandfather, both of them beaming in front of a humble wooden house in Enugu. He could almost hear her voice again. "I met your grandfather when he had nothing. Together, we built everything." Those words hit him like thunder. Maybe that's what I've been doing wrong, he thought. Maybe I've been too rich to find real love. That same night, Williams made a wild decision. He would go undercover, strip away the Rolex, the Rolls-Royce, the prestige, just for a while, just long enough to see if someone could love him without all the noise. He created a new, modest online dating profile. No flashy cars, no luxury travel pictures, no mention of his wealth, just Williams, a civil engineer from Gbagada, a simple guy who loves Lagos and Netflix. He matched with Sarah Nwachukwu, a stunning woman with flawless skin, a charming laugh, and big dreams. Their chats were light and sweet. She said she wanted a man with vision. Williams decided it was time to meet. He invited her to a modest fast food joint on the mainland. He showed up in old jeans, sneakers, and a plain t-shirt. No driver, no security detail, just him. When Sarah walked in, she froze. "Are you Williams?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Yes," he smiled. "Nice to finally meet you in person." She glanced at his clothes, at the tiled floor beneath her heels, then back at him, her face twisted. "Wait, what is this?" she asked, loud enough for heads to turn. "Is this some kind of joke? Your profile pictures made you look rich." He chuckled, trying to ease the tension. "I wanted to keep it real. Hope you don't mind the spot." She cut him off, stepping back. "You can't be serious. I wore my best wig for this. You invited me to this dump, dressed like a mechanic." "I just thought," he began, but she snapped. "Don't touch me, you dirty pig," she shouted. "I can't believe I wasted my time on a lowlife like you." Then came the slap, loud, public, humiliating. Sarah stormed out without looking back. Williams stood there, stunned but smiling. Not because it didn't hurt, but because in that moment he realized something powerful. He had just discovered the perfect filter, a simple way to separate the genuine from the gold diggers. For the first time in a long while, he felt something close to peace. And deep inside, a new journey was beginning. Not as Williams the billionaire, but Williams the man. The next morning, Lagos woke up buzzing like it always did. Williams stood by his bedroom window, watching the sunrise as if it held the answer to everything he had ever been searching for. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of doing something no one would ever expect. For the first time in his life, he wasn't going to a boardroom. He was heading to a construction site, not as the CEO, but as a laborer. He called his most loyal employee, David Ume, his personal driver for the past 7 years. "David," he said, his voice firm, "today we start something new." David entered the room, still buttoning up his crisp white shirt. "Yes, sir. What's the schedule? Meeting with the governor? Site visit in Lekki." Williams shook his head. "No, I need you to drop me off at Aja." David raised a brow. "Aja? What are we doing there?" "I'm going to be a bricklayer," Williams said almost too casually. David blinked. "Boss, sorry. What did you say?" "You heard me. I want to experience life as a poor man. I need to know how they live, how they think, how they love. And the best way is to become one of them." David dropped his car keys in shock. "Boss, please." This one you're saying doesn't make sense. What if something happens to you? What if they find out who you are? What if someone kidnaps you? What if— David, Williams interrupted, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's exactly the point. I need to vanish, just for a while. No one must know who I am. David swallowed hard. He had seen Williams pull off billionaire deals with a single phone call, but this was different. This was madness. And yet something about Williams's eyes told him the decision was final. Later that day, Williams changed into his disguise. Tattered jeans, a dusty shirt, and worn-out slippers. Even David didn't recognize him at first glance. No wristwatch, no perfume, no phone, Williams said, smiling. Let's do this. David dropped him off several streets away from the construction site. Williams walked the rest of the way, head down, heart racing. The scent of cement filled the air, mixed with sweat, dust, and the echoes of shouting foremen. He approached the site gate. A muscular man with a deep Igbo accent barked. "What do you want?" "I'm looking for work," Williams said. The man, Mr. Obinna, the site foreman, looked him up and down, then burst out laughing. You want to work here? You look too soft for this kind of work." "I can work," Williams insisted. "Carry that wheelbarrow," Mr. Obinna challenged. "Let me see something." Without a word, Williams grabbed the heavy wheelbarrow filled with broken blocks and pushed it across the site with surprising ease. The workers paused. Someone whispered, "This guy is strong." By noon, he had already laid 2 rows of bricks. His hands were blistered, but his spirit felt alive. No one knew the truth. That the man sweating beside them once owned the company that designed half the buildings in Victoria Island. That the new guy they nicknamed Ogre Pro once signed million-dollar contracts while sipping champagne in Dubai. But that was the beauty of it. Williams wasn't there to be worshipped. He was there to become invisible and maybe, just maybe, find the kind of love money could never buy. Minutes later, everything changed. A loud honk shattered the afternoon rhythm and heads turned toward the site entrance. A sleek, white Mercedes GLE SUV pulled up with a screech, kicking up a storm of dust and commanding attention like a VIP at a village meeting. Workers paused, conversations died. Even the foreman, Mr. Obinna, immediately dropped his shovel and wiped his face with his sleeve. From the car stepped out a woman, and Williams forgot to breathe. She was stunning. Her skin glowed like honey under the sun. Her long dark hair swayed over her shoulders, perfectly curled. Her white silk outfit clung to her figure like it had been sewn by angels. She wore designer sunglasses, red-bottomed heels, and the kind of confidence that made men stammer. Williams's mouth went dry. For a second, the entire site felt like a movie, and she was the lead actress walking in for a dramatic scene. But what followed wasn't beauty, it was war. "Obinna," she barked. The name cracked like thunder. The foreman ran up nervously. "Good afternoon, madam." A slap rang across the site like a whip. "You call this rubbish a fence?" she yelled, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes that burned with fury. "I gave specific instructions. Are you deaf or just plain stupid?" The entire site went quiet. No one dared move. Williams stood frozen, a half-laid brick in his hand. "Do you know how much I paid for this job?" she continued. "Or do I look like someone you can mess with?" Mr. Obinna bowed his head. "Madam, I'll fix it. I don't want excuses," she snapped, spitting on the ground. "Useless men. This is why Nigeria can't move forward. You're all incompetent." With one final glare, she turned sharply and stormed back to her car, slammed the door and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and stunned silence behind her. Williams stared after her. The woman had looked like a goddess and acted like a devil. "She's beautiful, no doubt," he muttered, still in disbelief, "but that kind of attitude, that's terrifying." The man beside him chuckled dryly. "That's Grace Uzor, site owner's daughter. We call her the pretty demon. She comes here just to shout. Even her father can't talk sense into her." As Williams resumed laying bricks, his thoughts were no longer on the sweat trickling down his back or the blisters forming on his hands. They were on her, the beautiful hurricane named Grace. He came to this place looking for the truth. But now a storm had entered his story, and her name was Grace. By midday, the sun was high and unforgiving. The construction site buzzed with the noise of machines, shouting foremen, and the clatter of tools. For Williams, it was a harsh reminder that he was no longer in air-conditioned boardrooms or chauffeured SUVs. This was real, gritty, loud, and exhausting. When the lunch truck arrived, it was like music to everyone's ears. The men immediately dropped their tools and hurried towards the food station, where two young women were setting up large coolers filled with rice, stew, and pieces of fried chicken. Williams joined the line, quietly, observing everything around him. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. He was still learning how to blend in. As he moved closer to the front, his eyes fell on one of the servers, a girl he hadn't noticed earlier. She stood slightly behind the trays, carefully arranging the plates, focused on her task. She had delicate features, soft brown skin, and a quiet grace that made her stand out. She wore no makeup, no flashy jewelry, just a simple smile that seemed to calm the chaos around her. Williams found himself staring. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward with his tray. The girl looked up, and for a brief moment their eyes met. There was something warm and steady in her gaze, something kind. "Hello," Williams said, his voice softer than usual. "May I know your name?" Before she could respond, the other woman, older, louder, and clearly in charge, interrupted sharply. "Is that really necessary? Take your food and let the line move." Williams looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But the quieter girl stepped forward, still smiling gently. "Don't mind my sister, she's just being protective." Then she added, "My name is Mary Ifedi." "And you are?" "Williams," he replied, surprised by how nervous he suddenly felt. "Well, welcome, Williams," she said as she scooped rice onto his plate. "You're new here, right?" "Yes, it's my first day." "Then you survived the hardest part," she said with a little laugh. "The first few hours are always the toughest." Williams smiled. Her voice was calm, like a soft melody in a noisy world. He accepted the food and moved aside, but instead of walking away, he stayed close, pretending to fix the placement of the tray. He just wanted to hear her speak again. Mary continued serving the others, polite and attentive, never rushing or raising her voice. Even when someone made a rude comment, she simply smiled and responded with grace. Williams found himself watching her without meaning to. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to draw attention, but somehow he couldn't look away. When the crowd began to thin, he walked back toward the serving table. "Thank you," he said again, this time more sincerely. Mary looked at him curiously. "For the food, for being kind," he answered. There was a short pause. "You're different," she said quietly. Williams's smile faded. "Different? How?" "You don't talk like the others. You don't look at people the way they do," she said, still watching him. "It's like you're here, but not really here." Williams hesitated. "Maybe I'm just trying to adjust." "Or maybe," she said gently, "you're hiding something." He looked at her carefully. No one had ever said something like that to him, especially not someone who had just met him. But it wasn't an accusation. It was more like an observation. Mary turned to clean the table, giving him a final smile before returning to her task. Williams stood still for a moment, unsure of what to say or do. He finally walked back to his spot under the shade of a tall tree, holding his plate, but barely touching the food. He kept thinking about her words. "You're hiding something." She was right, and yet she had said it with such gentleness, no judgment, just quiet understanding. The next day at the site, Williams was back at work before most of the others arrived. His muscles ached from the previous day, and his palms were still tender from the blisters, but his mind wasn't on the pain. It was on Mary. He hadn't stopped thinking about her since their brief conversation during lunch. There was something in her eyes, quiet strength, maybe even suspicion, that made him feel exposed yet oddly seen. In a world where everyone looked at him for what he had, Mary looked at him like she could see past all of that, even though she didn't know who he really was. But today wasn't about Mary, at least not yet. Around noon, while Williams was up on a ladder, helping adjust a window frame on the second floor of a partially built structure, he heard the familiar roar of an engine. He paused and looked down. The white Mercedes SUV had returned, Grace Usor. She stepped out in tight jeans and a silk top, her phone pressed to her ear, barking instructions at someone. Just like before, she moved like she owned the earth beneath her feet. But this time, she wasn't alone. Another woman stepped out of the passenger seat. She was breathtaking. Her skin was lighter, almost golden in the sunlight. She wore a long, flowing green dress that fluttered around her ankles. Her makeup was subtle, her features soft. She walked with grace, her eyes scanning the sight with quiet curiosity. Unlike Grace, who seemed to feed on being noticed, this new girl tried to stay invisible. Williams watched them for a moment, then returned to his work, holding onto the ladder as he reached to smooth the frame. The workers around him kept glancing at the two women, murmuring and pretending not to stare. Then something happened. "Obina!" Grace screamed again, walking toward the building. The Meister Obina was nowhere in sight. Most of the workers had retreated to the back section, working on scaffolding. Williams, meanwhile, was still at the entrance, quietly laying bricks. Grace, clearly frustrated, turned towards the structure, unaware of who was nearby. She stormed forward, heels clicking hard against the gravel. As she passed Williams, she shouted, "Where is this useless man?" And then, without even glancing in his direction, she shoved the ladder standing next to him, unaware that he was actually using it. The ladder tilted. Before Williams could grab hold of anything, he fell hard. The force of the impact knocked the air out of him. His side struck the ground, and the wind was driven from his lungs. A flash of white heat rushed through his body, followed by a dull, growing ache. Gasps followed. One of the workers shouted, a few rushed forward. Grace spun around. She hadn't even realized she had pushed someone, but the woman beside her did. She ran immediately toward Williams, kneeling beside him. "Oh no. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice filled with panic. Williams winced, trying to sit up. I think I'm okay." The woman turned sharply toward Grace. "What were you thinking? You didn't even look. He was right there." Grace blinked, arms crossed. "It was an accident. You pushed him. I was calling the foreman. He shouldn't have been blocking the path." "You pushed a man off a ladder, Grace," she said firmly. "You could have seriously injured him. Please, let me take you to a clinic," Rose Chima said softly, offering him her hand. "You might have internal injuries. You shouldn't stay here like this." "I'll be fine." "You fell hard," she said. "Don't argue. Let me help." With some effort, Williams allowed her to lift him into the back seat of the car. Grace rolled her eyes and muttered something about overreacting, but Rose ignored her completely. Later that afternoon, Williams sat in the passenger seat of her car, a bag of pain relievers resting on his lap. The doctor had said it was just a deep bruise. No broken bones, just rest, ice, and medicine. Rose drove slowly through the city, asking about his life. "So how long have you been working at the site?" she asked as they passed the crowded streets. "Just started," he replied. She nodded. "Is this something you've always done?" He hesitated. "Sort of." She looked at him. "That's not a real answer." He smiled. "I guess I'm still figuring things out." She didn't push further. Instead, she offered him water, then turned on the radio to a soft station playing acoustic music. The atmosphere was peaceful. "I know my sister can be difficult," she said eventually. "I'm sorry for what she did. I wish I could say she's not always like that, but that would be a lie." "It's okay," William said, watching her as she drove. "You're not responsible for her actions." "I still feel responsible," she said quietly. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then she surprised him. "Have you eaten?" "No," he said, "not since the fall." "Let me take you somewhere nice. My treat." He started to protest again, but she was already turning the car. They ended up at a quiet restaurant tucked behind a row of trees, the kind of place only locals knew. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and clean. They sat near the window, and the waiter brought them bowls of steaming pepper soup and soft bread. They talked about music, about movies, about dreams and regrets, about fear. Williams kept most of his life hidden, but the version of himself he shared, the humble bricklayer with a complicated past, was enough to keep Rose curious. She laughed at his jokes. She listened when he spoke. She didn't look at her phone once. That evening, as they stepped out of the restaurant, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and pink. She turned to him before unlocking her car. "You're different," she said. "You don't talk like most of the guys I've met." Williams looked down. "That could be a good thing or a bad thing." "It's a good thing," she said. "A very good thing." He smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Williams felt something stirring in his chest. Hope. Could she be the one? The person who saw him, not the money, not the fame, but the man beneath it all. He didn't know yet. But as she dropped him off later that night, after insisting he rest and call if he felt worse, he knew one thing. Rose Chima wasn't like the others. And in this strange experiment of his, where he'd thrown away wealth to find something real, she was the first real possibility. But even then, something inside him whispered, "Be careful." Because sometimes, even the sweetest voices can carry secrets of their own. Morning came with the usual chorus of hammers, cement mixers, and shouted instructions. Williams arrived early, hoping work would numb the ache in his muscles and quiet the growing attachment he felt toward Rose. He replayed yesterday's moments in his head, her concern, her calm voice, the softness in her questions. It felt safe. It felt honest. He didn't know he was walking into a storm. By late morning, a familiar car rolled in through the dusty gate, the white Mercedes. Williams glanced up from the pile of blocks he was arranging and saw her. Rose stepped out in a cream blouse and a flowing skirt. She looked serene, collected, exactly as he remembered. But today she wasn't alone. A tall man exited from the driver's side, broad shoulders, sharp jawline, wedding band glittering in the sun. "Williams," she called softly, "good morning." He wiped his hands on his shirt and walked toward them, trying not to think, trying not to assume. "Meet my husband," she said, turning to the man beside her with a proud smile. "This is Peter Chima." The words hit hard. Peter, husband. Williams felt something drop inside him, a quiet, heavy fall. He kept his face calm, but the noise of the sight seemed to fade. The sound of his heartbeat filled the silence between them. Peter extended his hand. "I heard what happened yesterday," he said, voice low and firm. "Thank you for not making a scene. I appreciate it." Williams shook his hand. "Thank you. I'm fine now." Rose looked at him longer than necessary. There was something in her eyes. Apology maybe pity, maybe both. "I'm glad you are okay," she said. "Please stay safe." He nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course." She hesitated as if she wanted to add something more. Then she stepped back. "We have to go," she said to her husband. She looked back at Williams once, then walked away. They left. Williams stood where they had left him, the dust rising in slow circles around his feet. The reality settled like a cold stone in his chest. He had been foolish. He had allowed a soft voice, a kind face, and a warm evening to plant a seed of hope, and now it had been torn out before it could grow. He turned away from the entrance and walked toward the far corner of the site, near a stack of unused concrete slabs. He sat on one of them and stared at the ground. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just breathed slowly and tried to let the noise of the world come back. He didn't notice when Mary Ifeadi arrived. She approached quietly, holding a bottle of water. "You look like you haven't blinked in 5 minutes," she said softly. He looked up. "Mary, I didn't see you." "I saw you," she replied, taking a seat beside him. "You look disappointed," he exhaled. "Did you see what happened?" "Yes," she answered. "I didn't want to interrupt. I wasn't sure if you needed company or silence." "Both," he said with a bitter smile. "But the company is better." She handed him the bottle. "Drink. You look like you don't want to exist." He took a long sip. "I thought she was different," he said finally. "And she is just not for me." Mary nodded. "Sometimes the most honest people are already loyal to someone else. It hurts, but it doesn't make them less honest." He looked at her, surprised by how direct and gentle her words were. "You always speak like you've seen too much." "I listen a lot," she replied. "It teaches you things about pain, especially." They sat in silence for a while. The wind blew dust gently over their shoes. Williams watched her hands. They were small but steady. He remembered how she had said, "Maybe you're hiding," and he wondered if she still believed that. "Do you think I'm foolish?" he asked. "For what? For believing in someone I barely knew?" "No," she said. "Belief is not foolish. It's human. What you do after it breaks, that's where wisdom speaks." He held her gaze. There was still compassion in her eyes. No pity, just presence. It calmed him. They started to talk, slowly at first, then deeper, about trust, about heartbreak, about control, about how life sometimes pushes you toward people who are good for your healing, not good for your future. Mary spoke carefully, not to cross lines, not to pry. Williams spoke honestly without revealing the parts of himself that still needed to be hidden. Yet, even with the walls he kept up, he felt lighter. He laughed at something she said about how some workers tried to impress her with exaggerated stories about owning houses they didn't have. "I don't need a man with a house," she said. "I need a man with a spine." He smiled. "That rules out most people." She smiled back. "Not you." Something warmed between them, not love, not romance, just a connection, clean, simple, anchored in quiet understanding. Then chaos burst the moment open. A bucket of dirty brown water came splashing from behind. It drenched Williams's shirt, soaked his face, and flooded into his eyes. He lurched forward, gasping, hands over his face. The liquid burned. It stung like chemicals had been mixed into it. He screamed. Mary stood up instantly. "Williams!" He was on his knees, coughing, eyes squeezed shut as the pain spread. A harsh, familiar voice rose behind them. "Good. Next time don't sit around my sister like you're special. There are rules here." Mary turned, furious. Her sister, the same one who had snapped at Williams during lunch, stood holding the empty bucket, face cold, arms folded. "What is wrong with you?" Mary shouted. "Are you out of your mind?" "He is a worker," her sister responded calmly. "He should not be pretending to be." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," Mary snapped. "Don't you ever touch him again. Do you understand me?" Her sister frowned. "Mary, you don't know this man. He could be lying about who he is. You talk to everyone like you know their heart." "And you treat everyone like they don't have one," Mary said, voice shaking. "I choose who I talk to, not you." William struggled to stand, still wiping his eyes. Tears rolled down his cheeks from the burning, but he was silent. Mary knelt beside him and took his face in her hands. "Look at me," she said, her voice steady but trembling with anger. "Can you see?" "Barely," he whispered. She led him to the small wash area near the back of the site and ran clean water over his eyes, gently handcuffed to shield the flow. "Keep them open," she said. "Let it flush out." He obeyed. Slowly the sting reduced to a heavy ache. When his vision began to clear, he looked at her, really looked. Her jaw was clenched. Her eyes were wet. Not because she was scared, because she was angry, deeply, fiercely angry on his behalf. "Thank you," he said, voice raw. She didn't move her hands. "No one humiliates you while I am here," she said quietly. "No one." He swallowed. "Why does it matter to you?" She paused, and for a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she did. "Because most people wouldn't defend you," she said. "Not here. Not like this. Someone should." He nodded, speechless. She stood still, watching him. "And because I meant what I said yesterday. You are hiding something. But you are not pretending to be a good man. You just are." He looked down. He wasn't sure he deserved the words, but he wanted to. By evening the site had calmed. The foreman had scolded Mary's sister. Workers had gone back to their tasks, pretending not to have seen anything. Williams stayed under a shade with a cold compress against his eyes, and Mary stayed with him. They did not speak much. They didn't need to. When it was time to leave, Mary stood and faced him one last time. "Do not let one disappointment push you toward the wrong type of comfort," she said softly. "Rose was kind to you. That was real, but it was not yours. Don't punish yourself with the wrong kind of closeness because the right one isn't here yet." He absorbed her words slowly. "You think the right one exists?" "Yes," she said, "but she won't find you if you keep hiding." They held each other's gaze in a calm silence that felt like the beginning of something important. Not romance, not yet, but a crossing of paths that mattered. As she turned to leave, Williams watched her go, then looked at the empty bucket lying on its side by the concrete blocks. His life was getting complicated, but something had become clear in that moment of pain, humiliation, and unexpected loyalty. Mary Ifeadi did not just have a soft voice, she had a brave heart. And for a man who had spent his life surrounded by noise, power, and performance, that kind of courage felt louder than anything he had ever known. The next morning, the construction site was already alive with activity. The air was filled with the usual noise, hammering, shouting, and the low rumble of concrete mixers. But for Williams, everything felt slightly out of focus. His thoughts were on Mary. Over the past few days, he had grown closer to her. Not in the loud, dramatic way he was used to, but in quiet moments shared beneath the rusted water tank, or while sitting on a pile of unused bricks. There was something natural about their connection, something that didn't feel forced. And for a man who had built walls to keep others out, Mary had quietly walked past them without asking permission. But peace rarely lasted long. That day, as Williams walked toward the west end of the site, he heard raised voices near the water drum. He stopped, listening. It was Mary. "Please leave me alone," she said firmly. Another voice followed, male, arrogant, threatening. "Why are you always acting like you're better than everyone here? You think you're special?" Williams moved quickly, turning the corner. What he saw made his blood boil. A worker, Chidi, one of the older men on the team, had blocked Mary's path. He stood far too close, smirking as he reached for her arm. She pulled away, clearly uncomfortable. Williams didn't hesitate. He stormed forward, grabbed Chidi by the collar, and punched him hard across the face. The man stumbled back, caught off guard. "What's your problem?" Chidi roared. "You are," Williams said, stepping in again. The man charged, but Williams was faster. In one swift motion, Williams ducked low, twisted his body, and swept Chidi off his feet. The man landed with a painful thud on the ground. Before Chidi could recover, Williams pinned him down, twisting his arm behind his back. A crowd began to gather, shocked. "Williams knows how to fight," one worker whispered. "He moved like someone trained." Within moments, the site foreman arrived, pushing through the crowd. "What is going on here?" One of the workers spoke up quickly. Chidi was harassing the food vendor. Williams stepped in to protect her. The foreman looked at Mary. "Is that true?" She nodded, still shaken. "Yes." Without hesitation, the foreman turned to Chidi. "Leave this site, you're fired." "What?" "But I won't tolerate harassment here. Go." Security was called, and within minutes, Chidi was escorted off the premises. Mary stood in silence, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She was trying to stay composed, but Williams could see her hands trembling. He walked over slowly. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "I think so, just a little shaken." "Do you want me to walk you home after work?" There was a pause, then she nodded again. "Yes, I'd like that." Her sister joined them later, and together the three of them walked quietly through the evening streets. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground. Neither Williams nor Mary said much. Her sister kept a few steps ahead, arms crossed, eyes sharp. They finally reached their home, a modest bungalow with a rusted gate and potted plants by the front door. Williams stood outside, ready to say goodbye, but before anyone could speak, the front door flung open. An older woman stormed out, pointing directly at Williams. "So you are the one," she shouted. "You are the man who won't leave my daughter alone." Williams blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she continued, her voice rising. "You useless man, following Mary around like a shadow. What do you want from her? Leave this house now and don't come back." "Mama, please." Mary stepped in, trying to calm her, but her mother wasn't having it. "You think I'll let someone like him destroy my daughter's future? Never. If I see you with her again, I'll have you arrested." Then, to everyone's shock, she grabbed a wooden stick from behind the door and lunged forward. Williams stepped back quickly. "Mama, stop it," Mary cried, trying to block her path, but the woman pushed forward, swinging the stick. "Leave," she screamed. "Leave now before I lose my patience." He didn't argue. He turned and walked away quickly, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sting of being treated like a threat. He didn't blame Mary, but the wound still cut deep. For the next few days, Williams and Mary avoided the gate. Instead, they found hidden places around the site to meet, behind the equipment storage, under the mango tree, near the wall, or in the shade of the concrete shed. They didn't talk about her mother. They talked about everything else. She told him about her dreams of studying abroad, about how she loved to sketch when no one was watching, how she hated being told what she could or couldn't become. He told her about growing up in a world full of people who only saw him as a name or a bank account. He didn't mention the details of his real identity, but he gave her glimpses of who he truly was, the man behind the mask, and every day they grew closer. One afternoon, while they sat eating quietly behind the site's workshop, Williams turned to her. "Would you meet me somewhere else, outside the site, somewhere quiet?" Mary looked at him for a long time, then she smiled. "Yes." That Sunday, they met at a quiet park. The grass was freshly cut, the air was cool, children laughed in the distance. Couples walked slowly down winding paths, lost in their own worlds. Mary wore a simple dress, her hair was tied back neatly, and she carried a small sketchpad. Williams brought nothing but himself. They sat beneath a tree, talking for hours about everything. About nothing, about things that mattered. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, they stood together at the edge of the park. The air was still. The moon, full and bright, hung high above them. Williams turned to her. Her eyes met his, and for a moment time slowed. They leaned in slowly, naturally, and under the silver light of the moon, their lips met. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, Mary smiled. Not wide, but true. Williams took her hand and walked her home, stopping one street before her gate. He didn't need to go further. He had already arrived somewhere far more important inside her heart. And for the first time in a long time, Williams felt like he had found what he had been looking for. Not in wealth, not in admiration, but in something simple, something honest. Love that didn't care who he used to be, only who he was becoming. Williams walked slowly down the quiet street, the moonlight still fresh on his face. He could still feel the warmth of Mary's lips on his, the softness of her touch, and the sincerity in her smile. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a moment, a truth. As he rounded the corner, he saw the black SUV parked discreetly by the side of the road. His driver, David Ume, stood leaning on the hood, pretending to scroll through his phone, but the smirk on his face gave him away. "You saw everything, didn't you?" Williams said, grinning. David looked up. "Hard not to." "You're glowing, sir." Williams opened the door and slid into the back seat. He leaned his head against the headrest, smiling to himself. "I think I found her," he said quietly. David turned in his seat. "Her?" Williams nodded slowly. "The one, she's perfect, David. Simple, kind, honest, and she said yes." David didn't reply right away. He had worked for Williams for years. He had seen him fall in love before, or at least think he had. Beautiful women, charming women, women who said all the right things, smiled at all the right times, until the money became the only thing they really wanted. So David chose his next words carefully. "She sounds special, sir, but—" Williams opened one eye. "But what?" David hesitated. "Forgive me for saying this, but I've seen this before. People can be different when they believe you're poor. Their humility shows because they think there's nothing to gain." Williams frowned slightly. "What are you suggesting?" "A test," David said. "Let me approach her as a wealthy man. Let me talk to her, offer her everything. Money, status, luxury. Let's see if she stays loyal. That way you'll be certain." Williams sat up straighter. "Absolutely not. That's insulting. Mary is not like that." David nodded respectfully. "I believe you, sir, but belief is not the same as proof." Williams clenched his jaw, then looked out the window. He didn't want to test her. It felt wrong. It felt like a betrayal of trust. But a small voice in his head, one shaped by past disappointment, whispered, "What if David is right? What if you fall again, only to be used again?" He sighed. "I don't like it, but if this gives me peace of mind, do it." David nodded. "I'll keep it respectful. No lies, just an offer. We'll see what she says." The next afternoon, David prepared carefully. He selected one of Williams's finest suits, a navy blue Italian designer piece that cost more than most people earned in a year. He paired it with a gold wristwatch and a sleek pair of sunglasses. Then he took Williams's newest vehicle, a matte black Bentley, spotless and gleaming in the sun. He looked like power itself. Driving slowly toward Mary's neighborhood, he spotted her almost immediately standing by the roadside with her mother carrying a small basket of vegetables. David parked just a few meters away and stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks. "Excuse me, miss," he said, approaching with practiced charm. "Forgive me for the sudden approach. I've seen you here a few times. You have a presence hard to ignore." Mary looked up, confused but calm. "Thank you," she said politely. "I know this might sound forward," David continued, "but I'd really like a chance to speak with you privately. Just a few minutes of your time." Mary raised an eyebrow. "I appreciate the compliment, but I already have someone in my life." David smiled. "That's admirable, but allow me to say this. I'm not just anyone. I'm someone who can offer you more than just affection. I can offer you a different life, a better one." Before Mary could respond, her mother leaned in. "Don't mind her, my son. She's single," she said, laughing nervously. "She just doesn't know a good opportunity when she sees one." Mary looked at her mother, embarrassed. "No, I'm not single. I said I already have someone and I'm not interested." David stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice. "I understand, but sometimes life puts the right person in front of us at the wrong moment. I'm offering you a future, security, comfort. All you need to do is give me a chance." Mary shook her head. "No, thank you, but no, I already have what I need." David reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "In case you ever change your mind." He extended it to her, but Mary didn't take it. She turned and walked away calmly. Her mother, however, rushed forward and grabbed the card with both hands. "Thank you, my son. We'll talk to her. She'll come around." David smiled politely, then returned to his car. Inside the house, the storm had begun. "You want to throw away your future because of some struggling bricklayer?" Mary's mother shouted, slamming the door behind her. Mary remained quiet. "Did you see that car? That man is a billionaire. Look at the way he dressed, and you insulted him by walking away." "Mama, I'm not interested," Mary said firmly. Her mother's voice rose. "And why not?" "Because of that boy from the construction site, that same one who eats food with dust on his clothes." Mary stood. "Don't talk about Williams like that again." "Why not?" "He's nothing, Mary. He can't offer you anything. And here you are turning down a man who could change your life in one day." "I don't need my life changed. I need my heart to be safe, and Williams gives me that." Her mother shook her head in disbelief. "You're being foolish." "Maybe, but I'd rather be foolish with someone I trust than be smart with someone I don't even know." The room went quiet. Mary picked up her basket and walked to her room without saying another word. Later that night, Williams sat across from David in the sitting room of his private residence. "Well?" he asked quietly. David leaned back, removed his sunglasses and smiled. "She passed, sir. Every word. She turned me down politely, but firmly." Her mother tried to convince her, but she didn't budge. Williams closed his eyes briefly, his heart swelling. "She really meant everything she said?" "Yes," David said. "You found someone rare." For the first time in a long while, Williams let his guard fall completely. "I need to tell her the truth," he said softly. "She deserves to know who I really am before we go any further." It was just past 8 a.m. when a glossy black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly pulled up in front of Mary's modest home. The engine purred softly before falling silent. Sunlight reflected off the polished chrome as the sleek car came to a halt by the curb. The neighborhood fell still. David stepped out first, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit and dark sunglasses. He adjusted his cufflinks and glanced around. A few neighbors peered from behind curtains. Children paused in the middle of their morning play, stunned by the sight. Inside the house, Mary's younger sister happened to glance through the window and instantly recognized the car. She gasped and sprinted to the back of the house, shouting, "Mama, that rich man's car is outside. The one from the other day." Mary's mother dropped the basin she was rinsing vegetables in. "What? Are you sure?" "I'm sure," her sister yelled. "It's him, and he's standing in front of our gate." Within seconds, the house was alive with noise, footsteps, voices, a sense of confusion, and rising curiosity. Then came another sound. Footsteps storming toward the front door. Mary Ifedi. She flung the door open, her face tight with emotion. Her brows were drawn, her fists were clenched. She thought David had returned to bother her again. "What do you want?" she demanded, walking toward him. "I told you I'm not interested in anything you have to offer." But before she could finish, David turned and calmly opened the back door of the car. Mary froze. Out stepped Williams Okori, not in dusty clothes, not in worn-out slippers, but in a fitted navy blue suit, a white shirt, no tie, clean-shaven, neatly polished shoes, composed, powerful. He stood tall, silently meeting her eyes. Mary's mother gasped so loud the neighbors heard it. You're rich," she stammered, stepping back, her hand over her chest. Mary's mouth moved, but no words came. "What is going on?" she asked slowly. "Why are you stepping out of his car? Why are you dressed like this?" Williams took a few steps forward. His voice was low but steady. "I'm sorry, Mary," he said. "I didn't mean to deceive you, but I had to know if someone could love me without my name, my money, or my reputation." Mary blinked. "What are you talking about?" "My name is Williams Okori, CEO of Apex Structures, the company that owns the site where we met." Silence, complete silence. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Mary's mother dropped to a chair by the wall, stunned. Mary stared at him like she had never seen him before. "So everything, all this time, you were pretending?" "I didn't plan to deceive you for this long," Williams said. "But after what I went through, after seeing how people treated me when they thought I was rich, I needed something real. Someone real. And then I met you." Mary's eyes filled with emotion, but it wasn't joy. It was betrayal. She took a slow step back. "I trusted you," she whispered. "You made me believe I knew you." "I didn't lie about how I felt," he said. "Everything between us was real, except the part I kept hidden." "And that part was everything," she said, turning around. "I can't do this." She walked quickly into the house, then without a word, the door slammed shut. David looked at Williams with concern. "Give her time," he said softly. Williams stood there for a long moment before finally nodding and getting back into the car. Williams couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He stayed in his mansion, staring at the windows like they might open with an answer. He had experienced heartbreak before, but this was different because this time it mattered. David, seeing his boss deteriorating, decided to act. "I'll go speak with her," he said firmly. "She needs to hear the full truth from someone else." Williams didn't argue. That afternoon, David returned to Mary's neighborhood, this time without fanfare. He sat on a bench outside her gate and waited. Eventually, Mary stepped out, her expression cautious. "What now?" she asked. "I came to talk," David said gently. "Not to convince you, just to tell you the truth." She crossed her arms but didn't walk away. And so, he told her everything. He explained how Williams had built his company from the ground up, only to find that most people cared only for his wealth. He described how hurt Williams had been, how desperately he wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he owned, and how from the first day he saw her, Williams had believed she might be different. David said nothing dramatic. He didn't beg. He didn't push. When he finished, he simply said he didn't want to lie. He just didn't want to be used again. Then he stood and left. That night, the mansion gates opened, and there she was, Mary. She wore a simple dress, no makeup, no jewelry, just herself. Williams walked out the front door, shocked to see her standing in his driveway. He didn't speak. She did. "I forgive you," she said quietly, "but no more lies." "I promise," he said, "never again." They stood there for a moment, the night quiet around them. Then she walked forward. He opened his arms and she fell into them. No more tests, no more pretending. They kissed softly, slowly. There was no luxury in that moment. No cars, no suits, no billion-dollar company. Just two hearts that had found each other through truth, pain, and time. Williams had finally found what he was searching for all along. Not attention, not admiration, just love. The sunrise over Abuja the following morning felt different to Williams. It was no longer the cold, distant light that watched over a lonely man in a massive mansion. It was a dawn of reconciliation. As he stood on his balcony in Maitama, watching the mist rise off the hills, he realized that the hardest part of his journey wasn't laying the bricks in Ajah. It was laying the foundation of trust after he had nearly demolished it with his secret. Downstairs, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. David Ume, usually a shadow of professional efficiency, was humming a tune as he prepared the schedule. He knew that today, for the first time in years, Williams wasn't going to work to escape his life. He was going to work to build a future for someone else. "David," Williams said as he descended the grand staircase, his voice lighter than it had been since the experiment began. "I need the Rolls-Royce ready by 10. But first, we're stopping at the market." David looked up, surprised. "The market, sir? Which one? We have everything here." "Not for me, David. For Mama. I owe her more than just an apology for the trouble I caused, and I think I owe her a better reason to put down that stick." The drive to Mary's neighborhood was a spectacle. The silver spirit of ecstasy on the hood of the Rolls-Royce cut through the dusty streets like a beacon. When they arrived, the neighborhood held its breath. People who had seen Williams as a useless bricklayer just days before now stood in groups, whispering in awe. Williams stepped out, carrying a large basket of the finest provisions and a small, elegantly wrapped box. The gate creaked open before he could even knock. Mama stood there, her face a mixture of profound embarrassment and overwhelming excitement. The stick was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she had tied her finest wrapper, and her eyes were wide with a respect that bordered on reverence. "My son," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know. Please forgive an old woman. I was only trying to protect my daughter." William smiled gently, placing the basket in her hands. "Mama, you were right to protect her. A mother who doesn't fight for her child isn't a mother at all. I was the one who was hiding. Please, let's put the past behind us." He reached into his pocket and handed her an envelope. "This is for the house. I want you to fix the roof, the gate, and everything else. And Mary tells me you've always wanted to own your own shop. Consider it opened." Mama's eyes filled with tears, and she nearly fell to her knees in gratitude, but Williams caught her. He wasn't there to be a savior, he was there to be a son-in-law. Inside the bungalow, Mary was waiting. She looked at him, not at the suit or the car parked outside, but at his eyes. She could see the bricklayer Williams still lived there, the man who had sweated beside her, the man who had protected her from Chidi, the man who had kissed her under the moon. "You look different in that suit," she said, her voice teasing but warm. "The suit is just for the boardroom, Mary," he replied, taking her hands, "but the heart is the same one you found in the dust." They spent the afternoon talking, really talking, about the future. Williams didn't want to just whisk her away to a life of idle luxury. He knew that Mary was a woman of substance, a woman with dreams of her own. He promised to support her sketches, her education abroad, and her vision for herself. He told her that Apex Structures was starting a new foundation, one dedicated to building affordable housing and schools for families like hers, and he wanted her to be the heart of it. Weeks turned into months. The transition wasn't always seamless. Mary had to adjust to the flashbulbs of the paparazzi and the cold stares of women like Sarah Nwachukwu and Grace Uzor, who couldn't understand how a food server had captured the heart of Nigeria's most eligible bachelor. But every time the world became too loud, Williams would take her back to a quiet spot. Sometimes the park, sometimes just the rooftop of his mansion, and they would find their center again. The biggest test came during a grand gala for the opening of the new Apex Structures headquarters in Lagos. The room was filled with the elite, governors, billionaires, and influencers. Grace User was there, standing with her father, her eyes narrowed in jealousy as she watched Mary walk through the room in a gown of emerald silk that made her look like royalty. Grace tried to corner her near the fountain. "You think you belong here?" Grace hissed, her voice dripping with the same venom she had used on the construction site. "You're just a girl who served rice to laborers. You'll never be one of us." Mary didn't flinch. She didn't shout. She simply looked at Grace with the same steady, compassionate gaze she had used on Williams when he was covered in cement. "You're right, Grace," Mary said calmly. "I'm not one of you. I know the value of the hands that build these rooms, not just the names on the contracts. Williams loves me because I saw him when he was invisible. You couldn't even see him when he was standing right in front of you." Grace was speechless. She turned and walked away, her red-bottomed heels clicking hollowly on the marble floor. Williams, who had been watching from across the room, joined Mary and squeezed her hand. "I told you you had a spine of steel," he whispered. A year later, Williams and Mary traveled to Enugu. They didn't stay in a five-star hotel. They went back to the humble wooden house from his grandmother's photo. It was still there, though weathered by time. Williams had bought the land and the surrounding forest. "I'm not going to tear it down," Williams told Mary as they stood in the clearing, the air smelling of earth and ancient trees. "I'm going to build a home here, but this shack stays. It will be the entrance to our house, a reminder that everything we have, everything we build, started from nothing." He took out the old photo album and showed her the picture of his grandparents. "They built everything together, Mary, just like we're doing." Mary leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart full. She looked at the blisters that had long since healed on his hands and the wedding band that now rested there. She realized that Williams hadn't just gone undercover to find love, he had gone undercover to find himself. And in finding her, he had found the missing piece of his empire. As the sun set over the hills of Enugu, painting the sky in shades of gold and deep purple, Williams Okori realized that he was finally truly rich. Not because of the billions in the bank or the skylines he had reshaped, but because he had found a woman who would have loved him even if he had never been anything more than a bricklayer with a dream. The foundation was laid, the walls were high, and for the first time in his life, the laughter in his hallways was real, the warmth in his rooms was permanent, and the love in his heart was exactly like the stars. Brilliant, guiding, and forever.